Once upon a time, in a quaint little village nestled between rolling hills and a shimmering forest, there lived a girl named Belle. Now, I'm sure you've heard of her before. She's the one who got caught up in that whole Beauty and the Beast thing. And I can tell you, it's quite a story. Sit back, relax, and let me take you through it from the start. It was a typical day when things first started to change for me. Imagine, you wake up, stretch, and think it's going to be just another ordinary day of village life. Only, it wasn't. You see, I never really fit in, not like the other girls. They all loved the same things, the latest fashion, the gossip, and the gossip. I, on the other hand, had a love for books. Nothing else could really capture my attention the way they did. But being me, that made me a little out of place. "You're such a dreamer, Belle," they'd tell me, rolling their eyes when they caught me reading yet another story. But, honestly, I loved the escape that books gave me. In them, I could go on grand adventures, meet mysterious strangers, and discover worlds I never knew existed. If only my village could understand that. But they didn't. I'd rather be with my books than in any of their endless conversations about nothing. Then one day, everything changed. My father, a kind-hearted inventor, went off to the city for a fair. It was just supposed to be a quick trip, but when he came back, well, let me tell you, he didn't come back alone. One evening, I was reading in my little corner by the window when I heard the sounds of a carriage pulling into our driveway. Curious, I put down my book and peeked outside. There he was, my father, looking a little more tired than usual, and beside him, an enormous, terrifying castle. "Is that where you've been all this time?" I thought to myself, squinting through the window. How could he have possibly gotten that lost in the woods? But the true shock came when my father walked through the door, and in his hand was a single, delicate rose. "I was on my way back home, Belle," he said, his voice full of worry. "And I got lost in the woods. I ended up at a castle. Well, not exactly a castle, more like a giant fortress. And there, the most terrifying creature I've ever seen kept me locked up. But he made a deal with me. I took a rose from his garden, and he demanded I pay the price." I stared at him, unsure if he was joking. "What kind of price?" He hesitated before speaking. "My life," I gasped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Don't worry, Belle. We'll figure it out. I'll make it right. I promise." But little did I know, the next day, my father would not be in the village. The air was thick with dread when I woke up and found that my father had left. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Belle, I've gone back to the castle. The beast says I owe him a debt for taking the rose. I'm sorry, but I'll return soon. Please don't worry." But I couldn't let him face the beast alone. Without thinking, I grabbed my shawl and ran to the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me as I made my way through the dark woods, each step feeling heavier than the last. And just as I thought I might turn back, there it was. The castle. Its towers loomed high, casting long shadows over the land, and for a moment I hesitated. "I can't do this," I muttered. But then I thought of my father, and my heart steeled with determination. I knocked on the giant iron door, and to my surprise, it creaked open. No turning back now. Inside, the castle was dark and cold, yet there was something strangely captivating about it. Massive chandeliers hung from the ceilings, and the walls were lined with ancient tapestries. Before I could take in more of the grand hall, a voice boomed. "Who dares enter my domain?" It was him, the beast. I turned, my heart pounding, and came face to face with the creature. His fur was thick and untamed, his eyes glowing an unnatural yellow, and his large form seemed to fill the entire room. He stood there, towering over me, a snarl on his face. "I've come to take my father's place," I said, my voice trembling but firm. The beast raised an eyebrow, his gaze unreadable. "And why would you do that?" "Because," I said, my breath coming in short bursts, "he's my father, and I won't let him suffer for something he didn't do." The beast looked at me, his expression hardening. "You're foolish, girl. But it's not my place to judge. You're free to leave, if you wish." I didn't move. "No, I won't leave without him." He seemed to consider this for a moment, then grunted. Very well. You'll stay here, and in return, I'll give you whatever you want. But make no mistake, I'm not kind. And so began my life in the castle. Days turned to weeks, and the beast, for all his terror, turned out to be something quite unexpected. Yes, he had a temper, and yes, he had a strange way of showing kindness, but he wasn't entirely cruel. We ate together, sometimes even talked, though I'll admit, most of the time, it was awkward. One night, as we sat at the grand table, the beast turned to me. "You know, Belle, you remind me of someone I once knew." I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" He looked down, his expression clouded. "It's a long story." A sad silence fell between us, but I didn't push him. And slowly, bit by bit, something began to change. The more time I spent in the castle, the more I began to see past the beast's exterior. The kindness he had hidden, the pain that lingered in his eyes. I began to understand him in ways I hadn't imagined. And over time I found myself drawn to him, not just because he was my captor, but because he was more than that. Then, on one of those rare quiet nights when the stars glittered outside the window, the beast took a step closer to me, his voice softer than ever. "Belle, I never wanted to be this way. The curse that changed me, it took away everything. My kindness, my ability to love. I never thought I'd find it again." "Maybe," I said, taking his hand in mine, "you've just been waiting for someone to see the real you." He looked at me, as though trying to comprehend my words. But then, as if on cue, the air around us seemed to shift. A magic, undeniable and powerful, wrapped itself around us. In that moment, I knew I had fallen in love with the beast. The curse was broken. But the real magic was in how we changed each other. And with that, the beast became the prince he was meant to be. And they all lived happily ever after. Well, at least, we did.